J9898. Nothing much, my friend. Nothing much. Just taking a quick break from life to do a live stream and hang out with you guys. How are you doing? How's your Wednesday evening going? El Nino, you were here in the last stream, weren't you? Um, how you doing, my friend? How are you doing? It's a little bit of a quiet one, I think. The last live stream, that one picked up a bit quicker than this one, but it's still early. All right, it seems to be picking up a bit. Got 4 people in the chat so far. Joe Stunner, good to have you here. Anything new, Joe? Hope you're having a good Wednesday evening. Joe, so you just got in from work, ready to chat boxing. I hope it was a good day. Hope you're not too knackered. Wednesday's always a hard day, the hump of the week. All right. So yeah. So fellas, today, as I'm sure you saw by the title, we have quite a bit to talk about. We have Kambosos versus Haney, or Haney versus Kambosos rather. We have Wilder versus Helenius. We have Shields versus Marshall. And anything else you guys want to talk about? Those 3, I think, they're the highest profile fights. If there's anything else you want to talk about, let's bring it on. Obviously, the dust has kind of settled as much as it can right now regarding the whole Conor Benn situation. And I don't know if you guys have seen, but just to signpost it, I did a video on Chris Eubank Jr. because he took it upon himself to carry on making weight, at least. That's what it seemed to be. And he did not look good at all. He looked emaciated almost. So yeah, I did a quick video on that. He actually uploaded a picture to his Twitter. And concerning. In case you didn't see the video, I actually was a little bit surprised because I didn't actually expect Eubank Jr. to make the contracted weight. I figured he would just concede and pay the fine. You have to imagine that Eubank Jr. is a millionaire. If he's got to pay something like 100 grand per pound, he'd pay 200 grand for £2 and have a bit more of a cushion. But no, he seemed content to try and reach a career lowest, but you could certainly see it in his physique. El Nino, did you see the Dr. Usman podcast? Lol. No, I didn't. I saw the link getting shared around a podcast he did fairly recently, but yeah, I wasn't really looking into it too tough because, and look, forgive me for not doing my due diligence, but the actions speak louder than words in terms of this Dr. Usman character has seemingly deleted his social media accounts, as has Conor Benn, I believe, which maybe they've been advised to do that legally, more so Conor Benn. But as I say, that speaks for itself. That really tells me everything I need to know. And as I said in the last live stream, I'm not sure if you remember, but I don't want to spend too much time uh, kind of lamenting about drug cheats and whatnot. Unfortunately, it is the reality of not just boxing but sport in general. But I think that's just my personal thing. I don't like focusing on it. I just, all right, it's happened. Ensure that a proper investigation goes ahead. Depending on the verdict of that investigation, uh, consequences should be faced by the necessary parties. So yeah, and to be honest, El Nino, I've got so much stuff I've got to do these days, so much reading and watching and all of this and all of that, that I'm really trying to streamline my workload. Um, but that being said, I'm always open to suggestions. So if there's anything that you think is particularly significant, I'm all ears. You know, if there's anything that you think is particularly telling or anything, I'm always open to suggestions. Joe Stunner, he looked like an anorexia victim. Yeah, it didn't look good at all. It didn't look good at all. And I don't know about you guys, but for the longest time, I've watched Eubank Jr. over the years, pretty much since his pro debut. I don't think I've missed a fight, and I always looked at his physique, and I feel like he's one of the few. Oh no, let me not say that. He's a fighter that would probably benefit from a little bit of time off because I know people, they see his physique and they think, "Oh wow, this guy is just an absolute machine." And yeah, I'm sure his genetics. You know, if you look at Chris Eubank Senior, very strong athletic physique and a lot of athleticism in general. And you have to imagine that Eubank Junior um, inherits some of that clearly, but I've always suspected that maybe, just maybe, Eubank Junior is potentially in a long-term state of overtraining. And now that's just my opinion as an outsider looking in because I don't see him behind the scenes and what he does off camera, of course. But I feel like there's well, I don't feel like, I know for a fact that there's a big overtraining culture in boxing, and a lot of fighters leave their best work in the gym. I've always had a feeling that Eubank Jr. was that kind of fighter, and maybe if he just took a bit of time off, not that he fights that regularly because he doesn't, but from the training, if he just maybe lessen the workload a bit, because you know Eubank Jr. he prides himself on his work ethic and uh, his dedication, which is admirable. But you just want to, I just want to see fighters get the best out of themselves, you know. But I could be completely wrong. He might be perfect in terms of his work to rest ratio. Who knows? Byron Newton. Hey, it's been a while. Byron, I'm pretty sure you've been on a live before. Outmatch only just joined. What is your prediction for weekend's fights? Wilder-Helenius and Marshall Shields. We're going to get onto that. We're going to get onto that in a bit. Just kind of letting people join the chat. TMT, as always. TMT, I think your attendance is like 100% right now. So always appreciate you tuning in. I know even on the quietest of days, I'm always going to have TMT here to keep the chat company. So yeah, Byron, we're going to get to the main events if you like. I have to be honest though, I completely lost track of the dates, and I was thinking that we had like 2 weeks left or 3 weeks left until these fights, but no, they're happening this weekend. So we will get onto them. Just going to let a few people join, as I say, see if we can get any more. In the meantime, I'm also going to check the schedule on BoxRec just to see if there are any fights that I'm missing. Because as I say, I've got to really reorientate myself and get my bearings back. Okay, so Saturday, 15th of October at the O2 in Greenwich, there is Michaela Mayer versus Alicia Baumgardner. Yeah, I don't really know too much about Mayer. I don't think I've ever seen her fight. I know I'm aware of who she is, but I've never seen her fight. Baumgardner, I've seen her fight once against Terry Harper. Very good knockout. I'm not the biggest fan of women's boxing. I don't often find it that entertaining, but that knockout was legit. I was very impressed by that one. Clarissa Shields versus Savannah Marshall, of course, um, that's the one we're all interested in the world of women's boxing. I think it's fair to say. We're obviously going to get onto that one. James Dickens or Jazza Dickens versus Larato Dlamini. Is he Italian? No, he's not. I've just assumed he's actually South African. That will be for the IBO World Featherweight title. That's at the Olympia in Liverpool. I think we'll be leaving that one, to be honest. The 15th of October, same day, Deontay Wilder versus Robert-Helenius. Very interesting one, that. Caleb Plant versus Anthony Durrell. Another interesting one. And then, because it's in Australia on the 16th of October, which is Sunday, Devin Haney versus George Kambosos Jr. Now, we'll get onto that one. I'll say that we'll get onto that one. All right, let's just revisit the chat. Hazzy Unboxing. I'm good, my friend. As you can see, just hanging out, about to talk this weekend's boxing. How are you? How are you doing? TMT, I only found out this morning all the good fights are this weekend. Yeah, it was easy to lose track. Something was telling me that Wilder versus Helenius wasn't until the last Saturday of the month, but it was it's this weekend. Joe Stunner, May is good, but it's very tight at the weight. I've heard that. As I say, I can't really make a judgment, but I've heard that from a few people. So it sounds like it's probably a bit of a prominent issue for Maya. J9898. What would you say is the most important punch in boxing, excluding the jab, and why? Okay, so excluding the jab makes things quite a bit more difficult to decide, because the jab obviously is fundamental. But you know what? I can't really say a specific punch, because I don't believe there is one. I believe that is, that's the kind of, it's a bit like the question, how long is a piece of string? And the answer to that is, it depends. And I say that because it's not as simple as saying one punch is better than another. It's about considering which punch is the best fit in which situation. And what I mean by that is, when you've been boxing for any length of time, because everyone or most people seem to have a very similar journey into boxing, where they do a lot of shadow boxing, a lot of pad work, a lot of bag work, and you start going into more combat situations where you have your first spar, your first little move around, and you realize that, okay, this stuff is much harder than hitting the bag and the pads. And one of the main reasons for that is that when you say hit the bag, like the heavy bag, that's a big target. It's very hard to miss. And so because it's such a big target, you can really get some good leverage into every shot on the bag. That's the purpose of the bag. It's designed for developing your power, your biomechanics, and your punching technique, and your kinetic chain, making sure everything is synced up nicely, and you have strength in those movements. Otherwise, if you don't, imagine you're a 70 kilo welterweight, light middleweight, and you're trying to lay into a 200-pound bag. It's like nearly 100 kilos. If you don't have strength in your technique, firstly, the bag's not going to go anywhere. Secondly, your body's not going to be able to deal with the return of that force when the bag, how can I say it? You go to release your energy into that bag. If your technique's not on point, it's going to almost like reverb back, and it's going to jolt you a bit. So that's what the heavy bag's for. It's developing that strength, developing that technique. The pads, so when you got your coach holding them for you, your coach is going to hold the pads in a way that makes it a bit more specific, and it resembles how you're going to use those punches in a fight a bit more. You know, we all know how when coach wants you to throw a backhand where he holds the pads, lead hook where he holds pads, uppercuts, that kind of stuff. But then you have the next stop, which is typically sparring. And now you've got a live opponent in front of you moving around, even if the spar isn't particularly intense. And what you start to realize is even if you've got a really good left hook technique, I'm just using left hook as an example, the fact that you now have to use that punch when your opponent's in a particular position, because that's what it's all about. You have really two factors in boxing. You have location and you have position. And now this is how I was taught. Okay. So your location determines where you are in the ring, the center, along the ropes, in a corner, that kind of deal. Your position is essentially what kind of posture you're maintaining within your boxing stance. Are you a bit more on the front foot, a bit more on the back foot? Are you neutral? Because that will determine which punch, not only which punch you can throw with power and which punch is your setup, but then also what are you vulnerable to being hit by your opponent. And it's twofold. It works for you and your opponent in that way. So to answer your question in a very kind of around the houses fashion, it really depends on which position is your opponent in that given moment, because that will determine which punch you have the best success with, essentially. And I'm going to leave that there for now, just because I don't want to overload you with information. I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, let me know. Carry on and carry on rambling. Has he unboxing? Pete McGrail back this weekend. Thoughts on his progress? I don't think I've actually seen any of his pro fights. I remember seeing him as an amateur, and you know because he was quite light for an amateur. I think he was a flyweight, wasn't he? He was in the lower weight categories. Um, yeah, I don't really have an eye on him that much, but um, yeah, I'd have to get back to you because I actually haven't really been following his pro career that closely. TMT Boxing Gems did a great film study of Marshall versus Shields. Yeah, I've seen a few of Boxing Gems videos. I don't think I've ever watched one all the way through, but I've had them recommended. I've checked them out, and yeah, I'll if it's good, if you recommend it, I'll try and check it out. Maybe after this or something. But yeah, Boxing Gems, from what I've seen, good channel, knows his stuff. Byron Newton, I've seen news that Ben failed another test earlier in the year. Any truth to it? I've heard that as well. I'm not sure. However, what I know of boxing, it wouldn't surprise me to say that, because there have already been rumors about how believe it was UCAD and the British board already knew about this latest test 2 weeks before it was announced. So when you factor it in, it's it wouldn't be surprising if there was more than one failed test. So who knows these days? Who knows? G the PT, salute. It's good to have you here. I hope you can stay in chat boxing for a bit. Has you unboxing? You don't think it's true about the other failed test? How comes? I'm interested to hear your opinions, because I don't know that much news. So any points of view that you guys can share be interesting. TMT, my body has a natural instinct and ability for uppercuts, while I struggle with hooks from a mechanical point of view. Well, that's the thing. Hooks and uppercuts, they're the same, but they're different. And I know that's like one of the biggest oxymorons. They're the same but different, but they're both inherently more rotational based. So hooks and uppercuts, most of the time you're going to get better or a greater degree of rotation in those than you would in a straight shot. That's just kind of the inherent nature of them, and therefore they have a greater potential for force, like basically power, punching power. Like most people, they can, assuming they've got a good degree of proficiency all around, their hooks are going to be harder than their straight punches. Um, Sometimes you get people who they've just invested all their practice into throwing straight punches and none into their hooks, and therefore they don't develop them. But assuming you're training all punches from a biomechanical perspective, most of the time you're going to get harder hooks than straight punches. Um, so it really depends what you're training, because at the end of the day, you're you have a natural instinct, of course, but it really comes down to training time, especially in a sport like boxing where the pace can get really high, because it's not a matter of a play, or like a sequence in boxing only lasts for a few seconds. You essentially have 3 minutes of freestyle. Do what you can. Okay. You and your opponent, 3 minutes, go on. As long as it's in the rules, go for it. And so, therefore, because the pace can be so high in that instance, you have a tendency to revert back to what your body knows, what's familiar. And if you haven't been drilling, your body's just going to go back to what you do most in training, which is essentially drilling, but it's just not structured. It's not intentional drilling. So you might find, TMT, that if you're doing shadow boxing for rounds, maybe the uppercut is one of your most frequent punches. The only thing with the uppercut is it's a strange punch, because it's like I've always treated body punches, like body shots and like hooks to the body and uppercuts, in the same family, where they're still part of the hook family because they have that rotational element to them. But the movement, the transition from forward to back or back to forward, depending on which hand you're using, right or left, it's going to determine. It's always going to be a bit shorter than something like a hook, where a hook you can, to the head, that is, you can pass all the way through because you rip through the target, whereas a human body is a lot wider. It resembles a heavy bag almost a bit more, because it's a lot. Um, it's a lot. I'm trying to use a term that isn't so suspect, but it's a bit more of a girthier pause target, and therefore it can, I want to say, block your weight transfer a bit, and you can end up being stuck on the center line. So you need to have a bit more of a contingency of what you're going to do afterwards, which you really want with any punch. But um, TMT, if you want, check out the folder I made called Outmatch Boxing Breakdowns. I've done a study. This was like last year. It was on Nonito Donaire when he knocked out Montiel. Because Nonito Donaire, exemplary left hook. And if you get a feel for the principles I highlighted in that video, you can apply that to almost any punch. So check it out. There's also the Julian Jackson one as well. That's more so with the right hand, but as I say, the principles are mostly the same. So yeah, if you want to get some improvement in, check it out. Byron Newton, coincidence how it's only come out now? Strange. Well, yeah. Now, excuse me, I'm just readjusting. We don't really know the ins and outs of the situation because we're all just outsiders looking in. Excuse me. But when you consider this, I guess, sequence of events where, say, 2 weeks prior, the first test was failed, and the British board and UCAD and all the relevant parties knew, and they agreed to go ahead with the fight because the public weren't in the know. But then some information's been leaked, and now everybody knows, and now there's pressure on the organisers and the sanctioning bodies to take action, and the fight's off. I think it's very straightforward, and I suspect that is the true to life sequence of events. So, I mean, it is what it is. It's kind of it's a black eye for boxing, of course, but you've got to move on and enjoy the positive side of the sport. J9898. Whenever I sparred, I noticed I find it easier to land the jab, left hook, and straight right to the body, but I found it harder to land the straight right to the head. I don't know why. Maybe it's biomechanics. Potentially, yeah. Because from that example, you're saying you're leading with the leading with the jab into a left hook, and then a straight to the body. So what that does, that is a very seamless flow of actions, because say you have the straight jab, and what that can do is, regardless of whether it misses or lands, um, you're most likely going to centralize, assuming that your opponent's in a high guard, you're going to centralize that guard, which then allows you to not use a power hook, but kind of a controlling left hook around the side, just to um, act as a control and keep the guard where you want it, which is by the head. And then from there, that slight weight transition to the back loads the right hand, which you can shoot to the body, because the body's open and you've already preloaded that right side of the body while controlling with that left hook. So that makes sense. Whereas if you're just trying to land the right hand, it really depends. Like, there are so many ways. I'd need to see like a video example to really explain what's going on. But just based on what you put there, that makes sense, to be honest. Because at bare minimum, you're adding more layers to your attack. Whereas if you're just trying to land a straight right hand straight away, it can be a bit nerve-wracking, because there's nothing to buffer it. There's nothing to set the table. G, the PT, first time catching you live. Good work. Thank you, my friend. I'm glad you can tune in, and I'm glad you enjoy it. Going for half an hour, so I'm just going to try and get through these comments and we can start talking about the weekend's fights. TMT, yeah, I only watch Boxing James short film study videos. The lives are impossibly long. I don't listen to them. Yeah, I think I saw that. His lives were like 4 or 5 hours long. I was like, damn, this guy is trying to get as many super chats as he can, I guess. But, yeah, I have such little time. All my time goes into my own channel, so I don't really have that much time to focus on anyone else's. But hey, it's plenty of resources on YouTube for you to learn. Joe Stunner, I had a great jab, right cross, but absolutely lousy left hook. My fist just refused to do what my brain was telling it to. Yeah, look, we all have strengths and weaknesses, but everything can be overcome with practice. That's the thing. As frustrating as it is, it can, once it becomes familiar, you'd be surprised what you can do. And that's why you should never give up. You should never think, okay, I just can't do it. It's just not in my nature. It's impossible for me to do it. No, trust me, it's not. Right. So, caught up with the comments. Let's get talking about some boxing. So, top of the list in terms of fights on the weekend is Clarissa Shields versus Savannah Marshall. Now, I have to come clean. I have seen more of Marshall than I have of Shields. And when this fight was announced, because it's been on the horizon for a long time, and so even before it was announced, I was heavily favoring Savannah Marshall. I just saw her as being more advanced a fighter, better technique. And yeah, she has a bit more of a relaxed style, which I don't know, I think it can throw people off, that kind of style, because they think it's lazy. They think it's a sign of weakness. But to be that relaxed is actually, it can work in your favor, and it can actually show, it can indicate a good deal of strength, but also mental relaxation, which is something that Savannah Marshall has struggled with over the course of her career, is nerves and anxiety. But I see her having a good amount of technique, and I think she's clearly proven that she has power, because in 12 fights, she's got, what, 10 knockouts, and a lot of those have been like legitimate knockouts, the kind of knockouts you'd see in men's boxing. Where was that? Who was it? Hannah Rankin. Was it Hannah Rankin who she stopped with that massive left hook? That was impressive. And as I say, I'm not coming from the most informed perspective, but I've always thought that Savannah Marshall is just the superior fighter. And when I look at Clarissa Shields, I'm not taking into consideration her character, because I don't think anyone likes Clarissa Shields. So it's like, it really goes without saying that I'm just, yeah, it's almost a given that she's unlikable straight up. But from a style perspective, the closer the fight gets, I can actually see how she has some success because she's a good athlete. She's very um, or relatively quick and explosive. She has that kind of edge, which I think maybe Savannah Marshall lacks in terms of that sharpness, that cutting edge. And so I can actually see Clarissa Shields giving her some problems early. Maybe not because she lands anything significant, but just because she's a bit busier, maybe, and she just kind of has that energetic, high pace style that can maybe challenge the slower pace of Savannah Marshall. However, I think the technique and the IQ is very heavily on Savannah Marshall's side. And I think when she starts to see that, okay, Clarissa Shields, she's quick, she's athletic, but she's not the most intelligent. I think she'll start to time her a bit more. And I don't see this fight ending in a knockout. I'll say that. I think Clarissa Shields is tough. She's going in with um, she's going in with all the belts, right? Or three? It's three. She's got the IBF, the WBA, and the WBC, and Savannah Marshall has the WBO. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's the case. Um, so yeah, I see Clarissa Shields going the distance, but I think she's going to lose on points. Probably, I don't know. I think it'd be relatively close, relatively close. But I do see Savannah Marshall being the winner. I don't expect her to blow Shields away. If she does, boy, that would be really something, I have to say. So yeah, I'm going to go for Savannah Marshall on points. Relatively comfortable after, especially a first few like shaky kind of rounds. Um, just got a super chat. Jeez, Jordan Anderson with a £10 super chat. Thank you very much, my friend. That is that honestly, I can't say how appreciative I am of that. It's good to have you here, first and foremost. That's most important, and thank you for that. Honestly, it means a lot. We're just talking about the weekend's boxing coming up, so we just covered Savannah Marshall versus Shields. I'm picking Shields on points, and I do think that Shields. Did I say Shields on points? I meant I'm picking Marshall on points. Um, I do think that Shields will be a little bit of a handful early, though, I must say. So Joe's saying Marshall's language style is very deceptive. Exactly, I agree. She mixes the softer punches with the full-blooded power. Indeed, she does, yeah. The days of anxiety and freezing are long gone, and Peter Fury deserves a lot of credit for his work. Joe, I 100% agree. That style, not just in Savannah Marshall's case, but you come across many fighters who have that kind of style, very relaxed, very loose, and it is deceptive because you think, how can you be quick? How can you be explosive with that kind of style? And you'd be surprised because a lot of the time, it's a very long example, but in anatomy, so the study of the body and muscles and organs and tissues and all that kind of stuff, many people don't realize that the human heart relaxes before it contracts because that relaxation allows the heart to fill with blood. And then that contraction is what pumps the blood. But the moral of it is the relaxation comes first and then the tension, because that's really the key to athletic performance, is the right amount of tension relative to relaxation at the right time. Too much tension it's not what you think it is. It's not, at least in dynamic sports. If you're a power lifter, you want a good amount of tension to maintain that kind of stuff. But the relaxation, especially in a sport like boxing, where you have to conserve energy, where you have to, you have a range of movements that you can do with the upper body, with the lower body, in synchronicity with one another. It's very important to be relaxed, and I find that Marshall has that relaxed style. And when she needs to turn over those power punches, it's right there. She's not straining. She's not like, she's not fighting her own body to get the power off. And that feeds into what else, the other point you made, Joe, which is about mixing the softer punches with the full-blooded power. That's a professional level understanding of boxing, using punches that are not designed to damage your opponent. They don't have that intention behind them. They used to open things up. They used to control the opponent while you get yourself into position to throw those power punches. People said that about Joe Joyce, and they think, what? This guy's power is so inconsistent. It's like that by design. It's called setting up your power punches. If every punch is a full-blooded punch, you're not going to be that successful, I'm afraid. And I think that's probably a bit of what Clarissa Shields suffers from. So, and Joe, you think that Marshall stops her in about 6 rounds? Interesting. I'd be surprised. I wouldn't be shocked. I'd be surprised. I think at the bare minimum, Clarissa Shields has an ego that will keep her going. But we'll see. TMT. Boxing Gems describes Shields as a volume counterpuncher from 3/4 to short range with still the ability to lead with jabs, fast, slick, solid base beneath her, static base though. Yeah, that's the thing. She's very basic. It's quick, it's relatively refined, but it's basic. And I don't think there's any room for basic at this level. I think Savannah Marshall can do that and more, and it will pay off in the fight. So, all right. I feel like we've had a good discussion on Shields versus Marshall. If you want to leave any other comments, I won't ignore them. I'll get back to them. But I think what we can do now is move on to Jazza Dickens. No, I'm joking. I'll never talk about Jazza Dickens. Gosh, I sound like such a hater. No, so I'm just not interested. Deontay Wilder versus Robert-Helenius. Now, I've been saying in a couple of videos over the past few weeks or so, I'm interested in this fight because we're going to learn a lot about Deontay Wilder because he suffered his first official loss to Tyson Fury in 2020. Obviously, the first fight was a draw. Took a real shellacking in that second fight. It wasn't even close. I don't even remember Wilder landing any meaningful shots. Had a layoff for what? That was like over a year and a half. Had the third fight with Fury. Had some success, but ultimately suffered an even more brutal stoppage than the first fight, the second fight. So he's not going in against Fury. He's going in against someone who's inferior in Robert-Helenius. But so there's going to be question marks about the mindset, the current state of mind of Deontay Wilder. From what I've seen, his training footage and what I've read in interviews, he seems like he's in a good place. How will he stand up? How well will he stand up if Robert-Helenius lands? Because Helenius is not the most dynamic fighter. He's a bit like the big heavyweight of yesteryear, where he's 6'6" and he's a big man and he can punch, but he's not a mover. He's not like an AJ who's also 6'6" and roughly about the same weight, but AJ's an athlete. Wilder 6'7", but like 220 something or in the high 2 teens. Very dynamic. Helenius is not like that. He's as I say, he's one of the big heavyweights of yesteryear. But to his credit, he can punch. And recently he's got a bit of momentum. And look, it's against Adam Kovnatski, who fights nothing like Wilder. But from a psychological point of view, Helenius seems to have turned over a bit of a new leaf recently. So look, I'm firmly picking Wilder to win. And I think he's going to win in spectacular fashion. However, and the mic's over to you guys now. What do you think of this? Do you think there's a potential here that we see maybe the final nail in the coffin for Deontay Wilder? Or do you, like me, think that this is going to be a good return to form, a bit of a recapture the mojo fight for Deontay Wilder? Because I'm expecting Wilder probably to get rid of Helenius within 5. Because, Helenius, he's been stopped by Gerald Washington. Gerald Washington, a big guy, fairly athletic for his size, but He doesn't have the most heart himself. Is Gerald Washington even that much of a puncher? I certainly don't think so. Um, and Helenius got stopped by him in what, 2019? Yeah, July 2019. Dylan White. A lot of people forget about that fight. I remember being very disappointed in Dylan White in that fight, and he got rocked by Helenius early. Um, I think it was like in the first or second round. And yeah, he had Dylan White doing the stanky leg for a second, and he didn't follow up for some reason. Not as much as you thought he could have. Um, but he did move quite well in the Dylan White fight. And I understand, like, moving around the outside, it's not particularly difficult against Dylan White, but Helenius can move when he wants to. Johan Duopa stopped him in 6. I can't actually remember that fight. I think I vaguely remember watching it, but it was back in 2016, so I don't remember. And of course, I think it's fair to say he lost to Derek Chisora back in 2011. But Chisora, once again, doesn't fight anything like Deontay Wilder. And that was a long time ago. That was 11 years ago. Jeez. What was I doing 11 years ago? I was, I don't know, probably having dinner after a long day at school. Joe Stunner says, Helenius can whack, but I think Wilder gets him early. I'm going for the second round. Okay, yeah, I see that. I'm picking within five, but if he gets him in a second, I would not be surprised at all. I'm expecting Wilder and Joshua to crash into the wall on the relatively short term. What do you think that TMT? Do you think that Wilder and Joshua are reaching the ends of their careers? Do you think that's it? Do you think it's really like curtains for those two? Didn't Helenius take the White fight some 2 weeks' notice? It was something like that. It wasn't a long build up because that was on the undercard of Joshua versus Takam, and obviously Takam replaced Pulev. It was yeah, the turnover on that fight was uh, quite short, as I remember back in 2017. But Helenius didn't he didn't disgrace himself. You know, so he tagged White early. It wasn't a great performance, but he didn't get blown away by White. So Helenius still has something in the tank, even though that was 5 years ago. X Dark Dawn X7, what a name. Helenius is perfect for Wilder, no upper body movement, not good footwork. I see Wilder KO Helenius in 3 rounds max. Yeah, I think that's probably the consensus view on this fight. But I think it's still interesting to gauge where Wilder is, because Wilder is a warrior through and through. This man does not get enough credit for his heart because, yeah, he talks rubbish outside the ring sometimes and can come across as completely delusional. But the second and the third Fury fights, he showed absolutely no sign of giving in. And I know after the second fight, he was coming out with all the excuses. But matter of fact, in the fight, in the midst, in the heat of the action, this man was in it until the very end. And so you got to give him credit for that. That heart, 10 out of 10. But has that taken a dent? Has it been shaken? We'll find out. I believe Joshua and Wilder can still exist beneath elite level for 2-3 fights still before facing real decline. Okay, cool. I see. I think. I think. I still consider Joshua and Wilder to be elite. I think there's still a clear distinction between Joshua Fury, White. No, Joshua Fury, Wilder, Usyk, and now Usyk and Fury. They're the top two, of course. But I don't think the gap between Joshua and Wilder and those first two is that big. Whereas those four and the rest, I think that's quite considerable. And look, I could be completely wrong, and I'm not making a formal prediction, but I've always envisioned Joshua having a lot of success against Fury. I could be wrong. That fight could get made and Joshua gets blown away. I don't know, but I just sense that Fury has a harder time than people realize when he fights, if slash when he fights Joshua, because Fury is an amazing fighter, truly is one of the best of his generation. I think it's still too early to say the um, greatest of all time. I think that's a little bit disrespectful to the champions of yesteryear. But Fury, in his own right, is a fantastic fighter. But he's fought Klitschko. Klitschko has a very particular style. Klitschko, a great fighter. Tyson Fury deserves all the credit in the world for that win. Beats Wilder twice, arguably three times. I'm not going to argue at that. Personally, I actually did have the first fight a draw and actually predicted it. That's like one of the best predictions I've ever had. Um, but yeah, Wilder's a particular style. Doesn't have much of a selection of dangerous punches other than the right hand. And that's enough to have an advantage because you know what to be wary of. Not to say that Wilder's a slouch because he's a very dangerous man. And then you have Dylan White, who slow feet, good counter puncher, but he's more of just the left hook. Whereas Joshua, um, he has his own weaknesses for sure, but he's a two-handed fighter for one. He has straight punches left and right, hooks left and right, uppercuts left and right. Doesn't have the best stamina or chin or powers of recovery, but um, I don't see Tyson Fury addressing a potential AJ fight the same way as he does with a Wilder fight, and therefore, for me, the jury's still out. If that fight got made anytime soon, I'd pick Fury, but I'm willing to entertain the possibility that Joshua does better than Wilder, um, or at least just as good. Say, like in the third fight, maybe. Um, Joe Stunner, Wilder's the type of man you have to knock clean out. He has an I'm going to struggle to say this word, indomitable spirit. Yes, he does indeed. Wilder, he is a true warrior. Truly, true warrior. He is. Jimmy, 100% spot on outmatch. Oh, thanks. I'm not sure which point you're alluding to, but I'll take it. Thanks. J9898, what do you think of Shakur's performance against Conceição? I thought he looked good, but he didn't look as good on the front foot as he looked against Herring, for example. He was getting hit more. Well, I have to come clean. I haven't seen that fight in its entirety. The Conceição fight with Shakur Stevenson. Shakur Stevenson seems to just have the timing, but I think it's because he's not really fighting fighters who can challenge that timing. I'm not sure how well Shakur does against Lomachenko, for example, because Lomachenko has so many layers that he can use to bait you. And if you're Shakur, I'm not, as I say, he's got that timing down and nobody's been able to challenge it. Whereas I think someone like Lomachenko might be able to work around it. And I don't imagine that Lomachenko is going to be as intimidated by Shakur's power as he was by Teofimo Lopez. Because Teofimo Lopez, on his day, is a dangerous, dangerous puncher. He's super sharp with the left hand or the right hand. Whereas Shakur, I don't know. I'm not sure. But yeah, I can't go that much in depth. I can't go in that much depth with on Shakur's performance against Conceição because I didn't see it all. I just saw highlights. So much bloody boxing these days that I can't catch up. Jimmy, would you get people on with StreamYard Outmatch? Yeah. I've had a couple of people on before. Usually, I've had boxing on the edge a couple times. I did actually mention to Joe last time, Joe Stunner, that I'd get him on. Today was a bit of a short notice one. I only put up a placeholder for this a couple of hours in advance. So figured I'll just jump on. I wasn't even planning for this one to be particularly long. I was only like an hour. Um, and we're already like 53 minutes in. But yeah, that's going to be something that I do more so in the future as well. When I'm able to like give people definite dates and whatnot and enough time in advance. Shakur versus Devin Haney. How do I see it going? Okay, this will be a good segue into Devin Haney versus George Kambosos. But Shakur versus Devin, I don't know. I think we've all seen that video of them sparring back in the day. I've always been more impressed by Shakur Stevenson than Devin Haney. Devin Haney just, I've always said that he how can I say it? Devin Haney, in my opinion, suffers from the post Mayweather, the post Mayweather era syndrome, where Floyd Mayweather, amazing fighter, in his prime, nothing got past Mayweather because he was just the ultimate technician, an amazing athlete, and a decent finisher as well. But then we got this stage of Mayweather's career, the money Mayweather phase, where he was just like the grandmaster of boxing and his technique got like really lazy. It was still brilliant at times, but you could see that he wasn't going through the gears. He was kind of just going through fights at a pace where he didn't really have to stick to the rules so much, if that makes sense. He was a lot of the time outclassing his opponents just because he had he had much more experience, much better technique. But by his standards, the technique wasn't great. And not just Devin Haney, but a load of young fighters coming through, amateurs and pro in the UK and the US. They've grown up watching that version of Floyd Mayweather, and they're trying to emulate what he does. But they didn't earn their stripes like a young Mayweather did. They don't understand the thought process and the experience that Mayweather has, or that version of Mayweather has, that allowed him to almost get away with the technique that he was using in the latter stage of his career. And Devin Haney, I think, is kind of one of the main culprits of that, if that makes sense, where he's modeled himself off a young Floyd, but doesn't necessarily understand all that goes into it. Hope that makes sense. Joe Stunner. Anytime, mates, give me a shout. Yes, I will do. I will have to arrange some way of talking because obviously I don't want to like have conversations back and forth from comment sections. So it's a bit of a stretch, but are you in Hatman's Element by any chance? Because the Element group, like G-Man's there, and I talk to him on there all the time. And it just makes things a bit easier to arrange. So if you could get on there, or just get on Element in general, and yeah, we can chat on there and arrange something. Jimmy, I meant more so getting the general public on to talk boxing. Yeah, maybe. Do you mean like what G-Man does when sometimes he'll just say, look, the floor's open if you want to come on? That kind of stuff, maybe, yeah. I'd like to do that, but I'd probably reserve it to the people who I'm familiar with, in terms of people who I know aren't going to troll, kind of thing. Not to say that, Jimmy, that you would be that kind of person, assuming that you would ever want to. But yeah, if you kind of get my drift, like the regulars, the people who I talk about boxing with a lot, yeah, come on, like 10, 15 minutes, we'll have a bunch of you on, talk about boxing, that kind of stuff. Joe, no, I'm not, to be honest. Don't even know what Element is. Element's just like Discord. It's like how can I say? It's an encrypted chat room almost, where there are groups you can talk about all different topics, but then you also have one-to-one conversations as well. So yeah, if you want to jump on Element, you can like download it on like phone app. I've got it on the web browser as well. Just like encrypted messenger. that kind of thing. All right. Devin Haney versus George Kambosos Jr. Sigh. Ah, this fight. Why is it happening? Why is it happening? Yeah, this fight. You guys, I'm sure you know by now how I feel about immediate rematches. I'm very rarely enthusiastic for them. In this one, I can't think of a more pointless rematch. I think this is an example of a rematch happening purely because someone was allowed to, excuse me, enforce it. And we've got to sit through it again because that first fight was so forgettable. It was just, it could put a glass eye to sleep, in my opinion, because Devin Haney, he's talented, but he's not so skilled that I'm like blown away by him. And I'm someone, I love skills. I love a technical boxing match, but that just wasn't it. And George Kambosos was just so like one dimensional. I mean, I've never rated him that highly, but even by the standard I held him to, that was not good at all. And did George Kambosos really give a champion's effort? I'm not sure if he did. And so when I'm looking at this rematch, I'm just thinking, why? I don't want to be a downer. Like, I'm a glasses half full kind of guy, but this, yeah, this saga is tired, and it's only just started. So Devin Haney versus George Kambosos Jr. I'm probably just going to go for Haney on points again. I'm not. I could be wrong, but I'm not sure how much more Kambosos can do, to be honest, because he's not a young man. He's 29, but he's been in boxing for a long time. How much can he really change to address Devin Haney? I think Devin Haney, to be honest, probably just has his number. I don't think George Kambosos is a formidable enough puncher to really change the course and the flow of the fight. And even if he was, Devin Haney can be quite slippery. He's very ragged sometimes. Devin Haney's not the most smooth and proficient technical boxer, I think. He's quite ragged, and as I say, he resembles an older Mayweather who didn't really care too much about quality, if that makes sense. So, yeah, maybe I don't know. Maybe George Kambosos can stick something on Haney early and cut him and bust him up and something like that. But I just can't see it. And TMT, Haney and Kambosos are very one-dimensional, and Haney has the stylistic favorable matchup. Yeah. I think Haney just has his number, and Kambosos doesn't have enough to overcome it. Doesn't have enough dimensions. Felix Navarrete, I'd rather watch a rematch between Lopez and Kambosos. Yeah, at least that one had some good exchanges. I think yeah, I'd rather see that. Kambosos though, I've just never been impressed. I've never watched one of his fights and thought, okay, this guy's really something, and I think he's got great talent. And I've known of Kambosos for a long time. I've seen a fair few of his fights, and I've never been entertained. I've never been blown away. But then I could say the same thing about Devin Haney. So I guess they are in a similar league, but from a stylistic point of view, as TMT says, I just have to side with Haney. Jimmy asks, does Wilder land on Usyk if they fight? Do you think Usyk takes Wilder's power like Fury seemingly can? Good question. I think I wouldn't bank on it at all. I think Fury, even though he got hit flush by Wilder and felt the effects of the punches, especially in the third fight, Fury's powers of recovery are unparalleled. He can shake off the effects of a punch in no time. Usyk, I'm not sure about, but Usyk does the best thing, and that's limit how much he gets hit. I think that Usyk is a bad matchup for Deontay Wilder. Deontay Wilder is not very well coordinated. Um, he can be outworked because he does have stretches in fights where he doesn't do much. And if you look at, say, like the Artur Spilka fight from 6 years ago, nearly 7, Spilka gave him all kinds of problems. Spilka's nowhere near the level of an Alexander Usyk, even though the size isn't too dissimilar. So Usyk would have to be careful though. But I think once again he'd understand that, okay, the only thing I'm really at danger of being hit by is the right hand, and I think he'd just be able to work around it. And Wilder might land on him, but would he land clean? Would he? Would it always be a cuffing shot, or was Usyk always able to move with the punch? How would Deontay Wilder be able to let that punch go if Usyk gets an angle on him and lead foot dominance? Um, I think that's, as I say, it's a dangerous fight. Wilder is a dangerous fight for anyone, but I'd be favouring Usyk. I think he'd be able to go through, get through that fight, probably win it on points. Lamin 8, resonate. Wilder is hopeless. Well, Wilder is hopless. I'm assuming you meant to write hopeless. I wouldn't say Wilder's hopeless. I'll just say that his effectiveness is situational. Wilder in a shootout can beat any man, but if you're able to stop it from being a shootout, then you're in with a shot. I actually did a study on, it was like a little breakdown of the lead up to the knockout in the third Fury fight with Fury and Wilder. So you can check that on the channel in the Outmatch boxing breakdowns folder. It's what did I call it? It was like breaking down. You'll see it. You'll see it. It was like, damn it, I can't remember what it's called. How have I forgotten the name of my own video? Bear with me, people. And basically, while I'm looking for it, deconstructing Tyson Fury's savage knockout of Deontay Wilder. Tyson Fury was actually able to stand in front of Wilder for a long stretch in the lead up to that knockout because he understood how to nullify the right hand. And obviously he has size an advantage over Wilder, which very few people have. But just with a bit of awareness, he was able to take that right hand away from Wilder, even though he was standing in front of him the whole time. So, Wilder's ability is situational, I want to say. How does Wilder versus Joyce go? Irresistible force versus immovable object. Damn, that's a tough one. I like Joyce. Joyce is my guy. I like his style. I've always rated him. But I don't know. You can't afford to get hit by Wilder. And Joyce gets hit a lot. Well, not a lot, but more than he should. But maybe he'd be super cautious against Wilder. But Wilder's quick, 6'7", not even 220 pounds a lot of the time. He can just, zip that right hand in an instant. So I don't know. I might have to sit on the fence because if Wilder's power didn't have an effect on Joyce, which I think is unlikely, I think it would at least knock Joyce down. If Wilder's punch power didn't have an effect, he's in for a world of trouble. But I suspect it would. But I don't know. That's pay-per-view right there, though. That is pay-per-view right there. I tune in every day of the week and twice on Sundays to watch that fight. TMT. Wilder has nothing to threaten Usyk with technically, but he has the power, grit, and ferocity of heavyweight boxing. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, from a technical perspective, I don't even think it's particularly close. Not that Wilder is a slouch technically, because he does set up that right hand quite well, but compared to Usyk, nah, it's not even close. All of which Joshua lacked, despite being very good technically. Yeah, exactly. So it just goes to show that styles make fights, personalities make fights as well. It's not as simple as, oh, this fighter is just the best one, and he beats all of these guys. Nice. Each fighter has pluses and minuses. They all have their own unique packages which they bring to the table. Can Wilder really afford to get hit versus Joyce? He's taken a lot of punishment. Yeah, that's a good point. And I guess that also is a question to ask in this Helenius fight is what have the two losses to Fury taken out of Wilder in terms of not only mentally but physically? Because Wilder took two hidings from Fury. That is a lot of miles on the clock. So, and Wilder's not a young man. He's 36, 37 maybe. He's getting up there in age. And obviously heavyweights do age a bit slower, but yeah, you do have to ask these questions. If Wilder cannot knock Joyce out with the first shots, he will probably break his hand. Yeah, you have to imagine Joyce, who has shatter his hand into a million pieces. Wilder will go down quickly if Joyce puts hands on him. Um, maybe, because Joyce brings the heat, and he'll land on you consistently with all kinds of shots. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. Hopefully that fight gets made. That's a good fight. But look, people, hour and 10 minutes. I think we're going to start to bring this one to a close now. Any final comments or forever hold your peace? Leave them in the chat. But yeah, I'm going to start to bring this one to a close. I've got stuff to do. Got to get some food in me. Got to crack on with some work. And yeah, probably leave this one here. Looks like the chat is dwindling a little bit, I think. Yeah, it's the evening. Let's settle down, people. TMT says thanks. Well, thank you to you, TMT, and thank you to the rest of you guys who tuned in. Always good to spend an hour or so talking boxing with you guys. So until next time, and of course, let's hope that this weekend's boxing is let's hope it's a good lot of fights. Jordan Anderson, thanks, and thank you, Jordan, for the super chat. Greatly appreciated. Joe, cheers as always, and probably next time, if we can figure out the timings, we can get you on, maybe as like a review or something for the weekend's boxing. Felix, good to have you as always, my friend. All right, chaps, that is all from me on this fine Wednesday night. I'll catch up with you soon. So take it easy, people. And yeah, till next time.